All right, everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to Accelerando and City Skylines 2. This is our 12-hour build, and this is Needs More Drums with our second episode of the build. And so the focus today is going to be infrastructure and our rail network. So in the last episode, we laid out our roads and some of our highways, kind of got an idea of maybe where, some of the parts of the city are going to sit, like the downtown, some of the suburbs, kind of close to the downtown. But today, we're really kind of just going to be improving on those areas and sort of pushing the boundaries of the city. And so we'll lay out some more roads. We just put down that big natural gas power plant that you're looking at right now. This is going to be, I like this power plant. It, provides, a lot of power, but it's something that you kind of could put down and then you don't really have to worry about power for at least quite a long time. Like this thing puts out a ton of megawatts and it'll be more than what we need for the city. And so the nice thing is that we could probably export some of this power too if we produce a little extra, so we can make some extra money. But yeah, just trying to figure out here where my power lines are going to sit, where the substation is going to sit. And I figured I need at least one or two of these depending on the area that we're building in. Definitely one for like the main city, and then probably I think I put one down later in the episode for like the industrial area, one of the industrial areas that we end up expanding. But while we're doing this, I just want to talk a little bit about, why are we even doing this series? What's the point of this build? It seems kind of, some people might have a more of an adverse reaction to something like this and say, well, you can't build a whole city in 12 hours. It's just going to look terrible and it's going to feel rushed and it's going to look, incomplete. And that might be true, but in my experience, I really enjoy builds like this. I think that in a game like City Skylines, it's really easy to fall into the trap of spending a lot of time in one area and then losing the motivation to keep building. And I'm sure that if you've played this game before, you've fallen into the trap that I have of, you're building the same blocks, and you're trying to like detail it up, and it just doesn't really get to what you want it to be. And the city feels like it's progressing really slowly. And you just never feel like you have anything complete. You just feel like the city's kind of in pieces. You know what I mean? Like you have, maybe some suburbs done, part of the downtown, maybe a little industrial area, but then you're missing like a lot of stuff. And so it gets frustrating, right? And then you step away from the game and you try to find the motivation to kind of come back, and you just kind of fall into the same cycle. So doing things like this mixes it up a little bit for me. I like jumping into the game and building with a purpose. That's really the whole point of this series, is to just build with a purpose, right? Like every episode, we're going to be making meaningful steps to completing a city. Right here, we're going to establish our infrastructure. Here's our water pumping station. Then we're going to build a water treatment facility, and we got our power, and we're going to have a rail network. And then, the next episode, we'll probably focus on some zoning and actually figuring out where we want certain, where are people going to live? Where are they going to shop? Where are the factories going to be, right? And all that's really important. And it's something that like, I get in the habit of playing the game for like hours and then I feel like I got nothing done. The nice thing about these couple episodes so far is that I played the game for an hour at a time and I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I feel like my city is moving forward. I'm building something that maybe I'm not completely satisfied with at first, but I kind of have to go, that's good enough, and we can come back to it later and maybe fix it if we have the time. But I'm not going to get too caught up and hung up on any one given spot for too long. I think you need to really practice like learning when to just say that's fine, let's move on. Because if you spend so much time in one area, you're never gonna get some like anything fully complete that you're happy with. You're always going to keep trying to just rebuild the same few spots. And it's good, it's good to redevelop your cities. I do it all the time, but I think it's important too to kind of always keep your eye on the bigger picture, right? You want to keep the city feeling like it's moving forward, like it's constantly expanding and evolving, and you're not just stuck in the same place over and over again. So that's really the motivation behind the series, right? Is to build something that feels complete in a relatively short amount of time, and we're not going to spend too much time getting into the nitty-gritty and the details. And it's been fun. And so here we're just laying out some more roads. This is going to be more, I think, of an industrial area in the future, kind of on the outskirts of the city. It's, you know, the wind is kind of, I imagine this as being like the west side when I look at the map, you know, and so I feel like the wind blows this way out towards the west. And so it's going to carry any pollution, you know, it's going to keep that away from any kind of residential areas or anything like that. And I'm also thinking about where maybe like a port is going to go. Originally, I thought that our main port was going to sit right kind of here where we're building now, just right next to that road there on the coast. But I think now that the more that I think about it, I kind of am leaning away from that, because I think that a port, you know, it's going to need a little bit bigger of an area and more of an area like just kind of to itself. And so I'm thinking like closer to the power plant, this coastline, like right here where we're that tile that we just bought, we're going to build a water treatment facility here. But I'm thinking we can actually expand on this coastline and maybe put the port here as well, because, you know, you figure we're going to have supplies coming in for the power plant. We're going to have, you know, just a lot of industrial traffic, and the further to the outskirts I can keep all of that traffic, the better. And you'll see later where we put the rail yard too. It just makes a little bit more sense to maybe think about putting the port here. Now on the other side of the mountain where we just were looking at, what I was talking about a second ago of the that was going to be the original location for the port, I'm thinking that might be a good spot for like a passenger terminal, you know, for like cruise ships and such, right? Because then it doesn't generate like the noise and pollution that a cargo port does, but it still serves as like a really nice divider between the industry and the and like any, you know, kind of other zone that we have over there, whether it be like commercial or residential. You know, having like a facility like that, like a passenger port, I think is going to really tie those two things together very well. And that's what I've been struggling with in this game lately. So this episode is the first one that I've recorded after, I've only recorded one other one, right? Well, it was episode 1, but episode 1 was before the Bridges and Ports DLC. This one is being recorded after it came out. I'm pretty sure. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I'm commentating on it after the DLC came out. It was recorded before. And so my point in saying that is that I the DLC, having played with it on some of my other cities for a little bit, the patch that came with that DLC has kind of made me rethink some things about what I'm going to do with this city. The way that the budget works is a little bit different. I feel like making money is a lot easier now. Same thing with the traffic is really difficult to manage after the new update. I gotta admit, you know, I'll get on my soapbox for 2 seconds and then I'll go back to kind of what we're doing here. But the traffic is difficult to manage. They seem to have increased the amount of traffic on the roads, but they haven't really given us any additional tools to fine-tune traffic flow. And what I mean by that is, like, it would be really helpful. I'm getting a lot of backups in my intersections, and it would be really helpful to be able to assign dedicated turn lanes and control which lanes of your roads go where, you know, whether it's a left turn, a right turn, or a straight lane. You don't have that flexibility. You can change how many lanes there are, right? But you can't change what those lanes do. So I'm thinking in my mind of like the traffic president mod in City Skylines 1. That type of feature in City Skylines 2 as a base game feature would be amazing, because they've given us now a simulation that requires that, but they haven't given us the tools to work with that simulation. And it's a bit frustrating because I find that my cities that I've, you know, didn't really, I don't want to say that I didn't care about traffic, but traffic was not really an issue because I felt like I laid out my roads in a way that were good enough. And now after this new patch, like my other series, Grand Keys, that city is gridlocked. Like, I just did a live stream in episode 30. I did a live stream, and it was the first time I opened the city after the patch, and it just like amazed me. Every single stretch of road was just full of cars, and every single sidewalk was full of people, and every single train station and bus stop was full of people too. I don't know where all these people came from. I don't know where they're all going, but it seems like there's just a lot of movement happening now. And I never had to deal with it before, right? So this city is going to be interesting, starting from scratch, to see if we end up doing a good job of you know, getting a good traffic flow, of getting like a good public transit network, because that's one thing that I didn't have or at least don't have yet in Grand Keys as of the release of this video is like a good public transit network. And I think that's really going to help, minimize or like reduce the number of cars and pedestrian traffic that I see in that city. So something I'm trying to keep in mind in this build is, I want to make sure that I do take the time to establish a public transit network. We're going to have a little subway system. We're going to have a bus network. We're going to have, maybe some trams and obviously some trains here. We're putting this down. And this is actually interesting what I'm about to do here. Where we're going to put this next train station, we're going to put a little station right here. And it reminds me of a station that I used to go to get to work when I was a summer intern a few years back. I used to work in Chicago, but I lived over the state border in Indiana. And there's a train station that I would have to go to in the middle of an industrial area to get to Chicago every single day. And this was before COVID. So, you had to be in the office Monday through Friday, right? So I would take this train every day. It was a 45-minute train ride, one way. And, that's what people did. That's what we did. We weren't able to really like work from home, just like it wasn't common. It wasn't something that people, that people did. And so this is this is kind of my inspiration for this little area here is like, this is actually, I know it looks like it might be a freight line, but this is actually going to be a passenger line. And we're going to have passenger traffic or passenger train traffic, going into this industrial area. And it'll sit kind of like a nice buffer between, the industry and whatever like residential and commercial we have around here. And this is again even a better reason. Now that I think about it, this is even a better reason to have like a passenger terminal port over here, because we can have the train station nearby. People can get right into the downtown via the train. You can move a lot of people really easily that way. So I think that just makes sense to do that here instead of having like a cargo port. So we'll expand on that idea in future episodes, but I'm glad that I'm, thinking about these things. And it's kind of fun too, to rewatch what I've built. And, as I'm doing this commentary, because you get new ideas sometimes. And it's really fun to see what you're doing and kind of, see what you can improve on and see where you've maybe made a decision that's a bit questionable, should we say. But yeah, this is it's coming together quite nicely. Key walls are still, I'm still learning. I've kind of gotten the hang of them, I think, pretty like relatively well. But like I said, it's not, they're not always the most intuitive thing. You kind of gotta learn how the controls work. Like right there, like don't know what I'm doing there. They kind of create this like divot in the ground. That's a little weird, but we'll figure it out. We're figuring it out, and it's gonna be fine. So, yeah, can't really complain. But anyway, yeah, just had to take a sip of some nice hot tea. A lot of talking, voice gets a little strained. But anyway, we're back. And I'm just trying to be deliberate about where I'm putting some main roads. One thing that I've realized since the new update is like, because of the amount of traffic, I feel like I'm used to using a lot of just like 2-lane and maybe some 4-lane roads. But I feel like in this city, I got to be a little more flexible in using some bigger roads. So I got to be mindful of, where my main roads are. Some of these 4-lane roads, I might even have to upgrade to 6-lane roads. I don't think I'm going to need any 8-lane roads. I feel like that's a little overkill for the size of the city that we're building. But it is going to be helpful to definitely have, more main roads and like 4-lane roads than just having like 2-lane roads go everywhere. Like even this one here, this might even turn into maybe more of a main connection point, because if we I think this is where I end up connecting, making a highway connection here, if I remember correctly, later in the episode. But we'll see. Either way, it's important to make sure that we have enough lanes for all the cars to get where they need to go. Now here we're gonna build our rail yard, and this facility is absolutely massive. I always love placing this down. It's something that, I love that they put this in the game where you actually have to have a train yard. In City Skylines 1, you didn't have to do that. Everybody that, built like a really big city always kind of built one, just, like a custom one. It's cool that you actually have to have one in this game to make it functional, right? And The only thing about this though is that I always like to kind of place it more towards like the outskirts of the city, because it is such a big facility. It takes up a lot of space. You know, you'd imagine that this would be pretty noisy, and so you're not going to put this like by people. You typically find facilities like this more on the outskirts of cities. I'm thinking like, you know, when I'm in Chicago, when I drive past like the Metro rail yard, and there's like some other cargo ones that are kind of outside the city, you know, that are just these huge facilities, tons of train lines, tons of containers everywhere, and you know, they're just like more, they're definitely closer to like the suburbs and these big, like really big open flat areas, rather than, you know, anywhere close to the downtown. So cool things to think about. Always like placing stuff like that down. I love to build, you know, efficient cities. Everything's got to function, or else I'm not really too happy about it. But yeah, just thinking here, you know, where these highway ramps are going, and trying to, they looked a little bit too big when I first built them, so I wanted to resize them, because I do want to put another connection here, and I think, you know, I need some space to have like a merge lane for the two connections, and we also have to have a make ourselves a little bit of an overpass here to go over these train lines. That's always really important. You know, you want to make sure that when you're building your train lines, you know, typically like in the way that City Skylines kind of makes you build your cities is a bit backwards, in my opinion. Typically, you know, if you're trying to be true to history, rail came first, mainly before roads, right? So usually you would see that your roads are more built around your train lines, but in, you know, City Skylines, the way that the progression works, it's like your train lines are built around your roads, you know, more naturally, right? So I try to be mindful when I have, you know, like when I do unlock train lines. Obviously in this series we have everything unlocked from the start, but typically I don't play that way. You know, I always try to be mindful about maybe where those train lines would sit, and when I start the city, so that once I unlock them, I can kind of plan them out accordingly, and, you know, put them in places that they may have like already theoretically like existed in, right? Like, you know, just kind of leaving the space for them from the start is what I'm trying to say. And an important, you know, part of that is making sure that you limit your at grade connections. So having, you know, a rail line that goes straight over a main road, or straight, like, you know, that crosses a main road, you know, at grade, where there's like the gates that come down, you know, that really impacts your traffic in a negative way. So we're going to try to eliminate as many at grade crossings as we can, especially on main roads. You can see that I've kind of done that here. I've put this road over the highway. You can see right here on the right there, where the train line goes underneath that main road. And both of these places here, you can see that we've built our main roads to have overpasses over the rail lines. And, you know, in real life, rail can't travel on a very steep grade, not nearly as steep as, you know, a car can, right? So I think, in my mind, I could be so wrong about this, but in my mind, rail, I try to keep like about 4% or less, and cars, I go up to like 10%. And I know that, you know, you can actually get probably steeper than that, and still be fine. But at least in the way that the game measures grades, I try to stick to those like couple of intervals. And so, you know, it's way cheaper to build a road overpass than it is to build a rail overpass, because that distance that you need to get to the correct elevation is way less when you're building a road than a rail line. So yeah, so I always try to have my roads, or at least my main roads, cross over my rail lines. I think it makes sense. The rail would have been there first. You would have built those roads either, you know, straight over them via an at-grade crossing, or you would have built them above them and have them cross over via a overpass. And so like these roads here, you know, now we can have some at-grade crossings. This whole area here is just going to be in an industrial area. That, at least that's what I'm envisioning as of now. I think, you know, we're going to need the space for it. The way after the patch, one thing that I've realized too is just how much space you need between industry and residential. They really changed the way that noise pollution works. So it does affect your residents in a pretty significant radius, I will say. So you got to be, you know, you got to really keep some distance between them, unless you want your citizens to, you know, get sick and be upset that all they hear is like factories all day. So just keeping that in mind when I'm laying out these other roads, trying to keep my industry as, you know, as far as possible. But yeah, there's that complex tool, curve tool again. I love that tool. It's really It has its specific use cases, but it's really cool once you know how to use it. You can get some really, really smooth transitions, especially with like highway on and off ramps. But yeah, this whole area too, this is all going to be industry all out here. That's what I'm thinking. You know, we just need a place for factories. We'll probably put like maybe a couple office parks. And that's a good way to separate residential from commercial and everything too, or not residential from commercial, sorry, industrial from commercial and residential, is to do a office zone. That's a really good way to kind of bridge the gap between, you know, some of the more busier workplace zones and just your residential zones. But yeah, I always like dragging out these little alleyways too for industry. You know, not everything has to be a big road. You can use these one tile little alleyways and they get the job done, and they look, you know, they look decent too. And also they don't have a high speed limit, so they're safe, you know, especially if trucks are driving on these. You'd want a little bit slower traffic. And yeah, I like how this is turning out. Just trying to make some additional connections. And here, this is, I think, like the last thing we're going to build is going to be this on and off ramp for this this highway here. Do something a little bit different. I see, you know, some ramps like this. Not, you know, just, it's, yeah, we're trying to make the best use of the space. Doing this type of connection makes it so that the existing connection that is just, you can't see it on the screen right now, but you know, once you get over this overpass on the left there is another on-ramp and off-ramp. And so I want to try to keep these as far away from each other as possible to avoid having, you know, like a merge that's way too close. So given a little bit of this interchange design allowed me to do that. And I know it's not going to be perfectly symmetrical, but it's, you know, it's pretty close. And it is amazing what you can do with the road tools in this game. I know that everybody has said that. And the more and more that I play and the more that I try to build stuff like this, the happier I am with all the road tools. I think I said that in the last episode too, when I was building some of those T interchanges. Man, like they're just so nice to work with compared to City Skylines 1. It's actually night and day. And I actually really enjoy building interchanges now. Before I used to dread it, now not so much. But this brings us to about the end of the build. So thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. And I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you guys next week. Peace out.